In this lesson, we'll do a brief introduction to cancer. Now, cancer is associated with multi-celled organisms, like animals. Here we see a human being. Now, we know humans are composed of organs. So we have lungs and heart and liver, etc. And if we go deeper, these organs are composed of cells. So the muscles in the arm here are made of muscle cells. The blood is consisting of blood cells. The brain is composed of brain cells. And we have liver cells and kidney cells, etc. So we can think then of an animal as a multi-celled organism, but it's not just it's a collection of cells, it's a society of cells. And by society we mean that just as people in a society do different jobs, and when they do their jobs well, the whole society gets along, so it is with cells. The cells have different jobs to do, and if they do their jobs well, the whole animal survives and prospers. So there's a key concept here that these cells are cooperating. They're helping each other survive. So let's use this diagram to see initially what are some differences between healthy cells and cancerous cells. So here we have some animal cells on the left, and we'll take the upper pathway here, the healthy pathway. Healthy cells are well-differentiated cells. Now, what do we mean by well-differentiated? Well, we just saw that animals are composed of different kinds of cells. So these would be differentiated cells. They look different. They perform different jobs. Now, the reason they look different and they're performing different jobs is because they're making different kinds of proteins. And so when cells make different proteins, they're going to be doing different things. So brain cells make brain proteins, and muscle cells make muscle proteins, etc. So that's what we mean by differentiated cells. So normal cells are well differentiated in an animal. In addition, they show uniform cell growth. And what this means is that normal cells respond to chemicals from their neighbors that signal when to divide or stop dividing. So this cell right here is actually listening to its neighbors. It has protein receptors on its surface that are receiving chemicals, and these neighboring cells are telling it, don't divide, don't divide. Now, there might be a change in circumstances where the signal will change, and this cell will be instructed to divide. But again, the idea is normal cells are listening, and they're obeying, they're cooperating with the signals from neighboring cells. With cancer, down on the lower portion here, it's different. The cells have lost this ability to listen and obey their neighboring cells. So we get uncontrolled cell division. They start dividing even in spite of neighboring signals that might tell them to not divide. In addition, we'll see that cancer cells have many abnormalities. So cancer cells fail to respond to chemical signals, and we can think of this as a breakdown in cooperation. So your own cells are starting to do things that they shouldn't be doing. They're rebelling against the animal's body. Now, like other cells of the body, like normal cells of the body, cancer cells require nutrients. They require food and oxygen. They need glucose for energy. They need amino acids in the blood to build proteins. They need oxygen to burn the glucose, etc. So cancer cells are going to need the same kinds of nutrients to survive as other normal cells. And they have an interesting little trick. Cancer cells, as they form a tumor here, will release certain chemicals that trigger the growth of new capillaries to feed the tumor. So as the tumor gets larger, it needs a larger blood supply, and the tumor itself is going to be recruiting more capillaries. So when surgeons remove tumors from the body, they are filled with blood vessels that are feeding the tumors. This process is called angiogenesis, the creation of new blood vessels. In fact, this process of angiogenesis happens during normal development, and this is how all of our body cells are very close to some capillary somewhere. So during the development of the body, blood vessels are constantly sort of growing and feeding the new cells that are produced as the baby grows. Now, cancer cells show many abnormalities. And we can think of these abnormalities as being the result of faulty proteins doing abnormal things. So in this picture, we see some normal cells up here, and then down in this part of the diagram, some abnormal cells. So here's a cell. Notice it's in the line-up stage of mitosis, but it might not complete mitosis because of damaged proteins or faulty proteins doing improper things. Maybe this cell here, it's got an abnormal mitosis structure here, and it may divide into 3 cells instead of 2. So again, when proteins are not doing their jobs correctly, all kinds of abnormalities arise in the cells. The cells have abnormally large nuclei and a small amount of cytoplasm. So there are lots of of differences. They express different kinds of proteins on the surface of the cell compared to normal cells. Lots of abnormalities found in cancer cells. Now, why are cancer cells showing all these abnormalities? Well, we say they're related to faulty proteins, but how did that happen? And this gets us to the root cause of cancer, and that is mutation. So in this picture here, we see some normal cells here, but because of either errors during DNA duplication or insults from the environment, it could be radiation or chemicals in our food or smoking or chemicals in the air, etc. So all kinds of things can cause mutations, so that when mutations arise, again, mutations are changes in the DNA sequence. It means that the recipes for proteins are being altered. Now, as it turns out, multiple mutations are required to transform a normal cell into a cancer cell. So in this picture here, then we see, okay, this cell will undergo a mutation, and so the daughter cells will have that first mutation, but then this one gets another mutation, so both daughter cells have that mutation, but this one gets another mutation, etc. And so you start to begin to have populations of cells with multiple mutations. And if these mutations are in genes that make proteins that control the cell cycle, the division of the cell, then you have the potential for cancer. So not all mutations will cause cancer. Only mutations in the genes that make proteins that regulate the cell cycle, those are the genes that, when mutated, can cause cancer. So again, the root cause of cancer is mutation, and mutation of DNA. DNA is a recipe to make proteins, and if you mutate DNA, if you change the recipes to make proteins, these cells are going to be making faulty proteins. If those proteins have to be happen to be involved in cell reproduction, then you have the possibility of creating cells that no longer reproduce normally. They don't listen to their neighbors anymore, and they just keep dividing uncontrollably. Here we see a picture of a cancer cell dividing.